Okay, Assalamu alaikum everyone. I hope everybody is safe and please confirm in the chat box that I'm audible to you.
Walaikum salam. Yes, ma'am, you are audible.
Okay, now we'll be talking about the same discussion that we had the other day. I think we completed um, the analysis section wise, and we were on the three unities given by Aristotle. And today we'll going to talk about these unities: unity of time, action, and place. I'm going to help reinforce the ideas once more, and then we'll be able to connect the dots of these three unities in Oedipus itself. So the first thing is to clarify what are these three unities. Like you told me in the beginning that you have studied these three unities already, so you know what are these, but we'll have a quick recap of these three unities. The first one that is important that you should remember, you should be able to talk about, is the unity of, wait, please, unity of time. So, what is the unity of time? In simple words, if you have to, remember it, it's about the unity of time where the entire action takes place in one time period. It is either 12 hours or 24 hours, not more, not less than that. Although there is a possibility that the character is going back into the history or thinking about the future or it is the next day, but on the stage, as the convention dictates, the Greek tragedy convention, stage conventions, they already tell us that unity of time is important because one of the limitations of Greek theater was that it could only be performed within the daytime and they had only sun exposure for the lighting and they were not able to change the settings and time again. Therefore, unity of time was important back then. The other unity which is important, of course, the thing that you should know that the narratives are of two types or two kinds. One is linear, the other one is non-linear. Now, in the past, non-linear plots or storytelling was not desired because it was not easy for the audiences to actually understand. Just because I want to showcase what happened in the past, and I cannot change the clothing and the actors because they had limitations. Even single one actor would perform multiple roles within the story, so that was some kind of a limitation that made them think this way. So these three unities given by Aristotle was very well helpful. So, when authors use linear narratives, the order in which the events they are portrayed or correspond, they are the same order in which they are occurring. So, stories told in the linear narrative structure would have a clear beginning, middle, and the ending part. However, if we talk about non-linear, flash forwards, flashbacks, जैसे आजकल की जो modern movies हैं, you can easily see the future, you can easily go back into the past, but on the stage, it's not a possibility to change everything. So, linear narrative was able to describe the story or the actions or the events which were taking place within the story in a linear and a sequential manner. जिसे आप chronological order भी कह सकते हैं. So Oedipus Rex is a linear story and it is presented in a logical manner by telling the audiences what happens at what point of time to the next without using forwards or flashbacks. Now, it's a good example of a story that is linear in fashion, yeah, which is following a linear scale. What is striking about the play is the movement in which the straight line knitting the past and the present, and it comes full circle as the Delphi oracle that triggers the plot within the prophecy of a heinous disaster ends on the note of its coming true. So शुरुआत के scene में, opening scene में, we get to know about that there is a prophecy given to King Lys and Queen Jocasta that they will be having a son that would kill King Lys and marry Jocasta. And in order to defy that prophecy, they take all the steps. But जो शुरुआत में prophesize होता है वो end में it comes true eventually. So that is how That is the complexity and beauty of the Greek theater and how it comes to a colossal tragedy. Both the characters, King Oedipus and King Lais, they tried to defy their destiny, their journey. They wanted to escape their fate, but they were not able to do so. Now, first one is unity of place, जो हम बात कर चुके हैं. Sorry, unity of time हम बात कर चुके हैं. Now, let's talk about unity of place. Now, unity of action is definitely embedded within the unity of place. Action is the most important one. That was the actually major unity that Aristotle talked about. Unity of place and time, both of them are the minor unities that he located in his write-up. A play's action takes place in a minimal number of locations, ideally just one. In the Greek ancient theater, one actor had to play multiple roles, like I told you, and these multiple roles played by a single actor had to be performed in one single location. So the logistical challenges in changing locations meant the frequent changing of the stage props and called for breaks in the continuity of stage presentation. So the time spent in the shifting of the scene would take the mind of the audiences from the sense of immediacy. Yani they will lose the plot, they will lose the interest. Therefore, it is worth noting that the plays were staged on amphitheaters which were large and open. As stated before, there were no curtains, right? And everything took place in front of the audience. तो curtain बंद और खुल नहीं सकते थे. Therefore, they had to resort to these three unities given by Aristotle. According to Aristotle, plot is the most important aspect of the tragedy, which according to him is the arrangement of the incidents. This gives the utmost information and sustainable emotional impact that the audiences need, which cannot be there in the modern plays and drama. Now let's take a look at Oedipus Rex. Okay, before we move forward, I would like to play a video for you so that you can get a sense of understanding regarding these three unities once and for all. This will be the last time that we'll be talking about these unities. One second.
Going to be continuing with our series on
Okay, please confirm whether you're able to listen to the voice of the video or not.
Aristotle's Poetics. In this video, we're going to be
Is it audible?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
looking at unities in drama. Now, the most important element of tragedy for Aristotle was the plot. With respect to plot, Aristotle is often said to speak of three unities: the unity of action, the unity of time, and the unity of place. However, these rules are not actually attributable to Aristotle, but rather to an inaccurate interpretation of his works by the French neoclassicists. While he does speak of the importance of the unity of action, he only briefly mentions the unity of time as more a description than a proscription, and is completely
Like I told you that these three unities are important, and the major unity which in poetics Aristotle actually talked about is the unity of action and time and in place. Both of them are minor unities which are embedded within the action. For action to take place, you need time and place. Time and place को you can categorize into the category of setting, which is very much common for you to understand. Novels में होती है, short stories में है, drama में होती है. सो उन दोनों को काम करने के लिए, एक्शन को प्लेस करने के लिए प्लेसमेंट और टाइम की जरूरत है. दैट्स व्हाट ही इज ट्राइंग टू से. एंड देन नाउ इन दिस वीडियो we'll get to know about the French classicists, how they thought about these unities.
silent on the unity of place. So, however, before looking into the impacts of this misinterpretation, we must define what is exactly meant by each term. The quote-unquote minor unities are easy to define. The unity of time means that a play must take place over the course of 24 hours, though sometimes it's argued to be 12 hours due to the ambiguity of Aristotle's language of the single revolution of the sun. The unity of place means that the play must take place in a single location. Now, these ideas sound very cool and interesting in that all the action has to be done in 24 hours, it's in a single place. You might see why these are appealing ideas. However, these were not things that Aristotle really argued for in any big way. He did, however, argue for the unity of action. The principal unity that Aristotle actually discusses, and the only one that he takes as requisite for making a good tragedy, is the unity of action. By this he means that a play should focus on a single plot, a single reversal of fortune from good to bad or bad to good. Everything in the plot should be essential to it, i.e. removing anything would make it disjointed. For Aristotle, tragedy is an imitative art. The thing that it is imitating is a single complete action. This is one of the things that distinguishes tragedy from epic poems, which often have multiple big actions and take a long time and are very long. Tragedy is about zooming in, focusing down on one single action that represents kind of the turning point of the story. Some people have described Greek tragedy and Greek theater as described by Aristotle as taking our normal conception of a story and zooming down to kind of the moment just before the climax, and the moment just after, not taking into account kind of the whole process of what was happening before, a turning point, the building to that final action. It's just this very zooming down on that single action and why it matters. There are some elements of Aristotle's ideas which have carried on to modern thought regarding theater. The principle of Chekhov's gun, the idea that if a gun is present in the play, it has to go off at some point, can be seen as being based on this principle. Basically, if the gun could be removed without damaging the plot, it should be. So, if you have any elements to a plot that are not essential to it, why are you including them at all? However, other elements of Aristotle's unity of action have fallen by the wayside. Many stories today have multiple interweaving actions, which are quite complicated, and may relate to each other but are importantly distinct. Much of Shakespeare's work does not conform to Aristotle's unity of action, having many different plot lines representing different actions that are going on. Aristotle briefly mentions the unity of time as a description of one of the distinctions between tragedy and epic poetry, not as necessarily a required element of a good tragedy. It's important to note that a lot of the things that Aristotle says can be interpreted as kind of ambivalent between this is what you should do and this is just what is done, but this leans more on the this is what is done side, whereas the unity of action leans more on the side of this is what you should do. He claims that tragedy attempts to limit itself to one revolution of the sun, which has been debated to refer either to a 12-hour period or a 24-hour period. Aristotle does not mention the unity of place at all in the Poetics, though some plays of the time did occur in a single place, so it might be understood as implicit in something that he said, though Aristotle was awfully explicit about a lot of things. So, anyone that's saying that Aristotle said the unity of place is probably on very, very shaky footing. Now, if Aristotle did not prescribe these minor unities, where did they come from? And why are they associated with Aristotle? The fault lies with the neoclassicists of France, starting in the mid-1600s. They advocated for rigorous adherence to the three unities, justified as, quote-unquote, classical by the claimed connection to Aristotle of theater, as well as the principles of bienséances and vraisemblance, basically following decorum and believable portrayals of events. Those could at least conceivably be pulled from some of Aristotle's principles about characters being virtuous, kind of having decorum, and being realistic or believable. So those principles you could at least pull out as Aristotelian. The unity of time and the unity of place, however, there's a lot more that is shaky in terms of whether Aristotle was proscriptive about those things, particularly place. These views on what theater should be held sway and were even enforced by strict censorship laws in France for over 100 years, influencing the works of greats such as Racine and Corneille, and were defended by Voltaire and Diderot against the English theater, which defied these rules, as evidenced by the popularity of Shakespeare, who very clearly had multiple plot lines, multiple actions, and stories that lasted sometimes long periods of time, and surely took place in many different places. Now, the rule of the neoclassicists was arguably brought to an end in the 1830s with the rise of Romanticism. In the theater, this is sometimes even traced down to a single event, the opening of Victor Hugo's play Hernani in 1830. The play outwardly flaunted the classicist rules of theater, and it even led to an open brawl between the Romanticists and the classicists in the audience during the performance, known as the Battle of Hernani. Think about that for a second, that a play could be so offensive to you not because of its content, but because of the way that the theater was done, that it didn't take place in 24 hours, and that it didn't have unity of action, and it didn't have some of these other things of the realistic portrayal and the virtue of the characters, that you would start fighting people in the audience over it. That is wild to me and shows in some ways the power of rising up against kind of that censorship that existed in France at the time. Now, though censorship in France writ large would not be abolished for another 120 years, this event and the subsequent ousting of Charles X later that year led to the relaxing of France's strict adherence to the unities of drama. However, due to this long period of association of the unities with the Aristotelian conception of theater, these concepts were inextricably linked to Aristotle, despite his focus on really only one of them.
So as in the beginning, I have told you that the basic focus was on the unity of action, but time and place comes with it, embedded within it. So that's important equally. Now we'll go back to the reading that we were trying to discuss earlier. Yes. Now let's link these unities one by one with the drama itself. Hmm. So Oedipus Rex is a good example of a linear scale that we have talked about, because in the beginning, we see an opening scene in which people are going through a plague, and then King Oedipus is trying to get the possible solution for it. And King sends his brother-in-law Creon to the Delphic oracle in order to know the reason. And in the end of the drama, again, in a cyclic manner, it comes back. We started with a prophecy that King Oedipus will do this disastrous and heinous act, and in the end we get back to the same, back to the pavilion, back to the point of origin where actually it started, that this prophecy will come true, and eventually that prophecy comes. And and all the human efforts, they are wasted. No matter what King Laius and King Oedipus tried to do, both of them at their ends, they tried to defy their fate, willfully took some actions, but Oracle had predicted that this will happen, and it happens eventually. So this oracle and information given by the oracle outwits them, and then they are led towards the colossal, the big tragedy by the end of it, by the end of the drama. The first unity is the unity of time in Oedipus Rex. Just to give you clarification, the author of this document has, in the first paragraph, has clearly told you that in the modern time, non-linear storytelling is a possibility, but definitely in ancient time, when we had these conventions, these stage conventions, some limitations, it was not a desired way of telling the stories. So non-linear, non-sequential stories were not available at that time. And Oedipus itself is a linear plot. It's written in a sequence. Now, going back to Aristotle's day, unity of time served more than one purpose, because the theaters were large. It was open for them, multiple audiences, and one role was played by one actor, but one actor could play multiple roles within the drama. That could create very much confusion among the audiences. So, in order to communicate anything that is confusing, tricky, or some body languages needs to be interpreted, or masks, everything was communicated through the messengers and the chorus. They would clarify anything that is out of the chronological order. Now, the main event on the stage where the actually drama starts, we are met with the deadly plague, and on the stage, the king of Thebes, who's Oedipus at that time, was recently married to Queen Jocasta, which he later on gets to know is his own mother. But the events, they proceed in ascent or in a very chronological order. उसको वही नहीं पता चल जाता है कि ये होने वाला है, although there are predictions, although there are warnings. Chorus और messengers and the blind prophet, तीनों उसको warnings देते हैं that your future lies this or your future holds this, but he doesn't agree with it. So the drama proceeds in a chronological order. Events that precede his ascent to the throne of Thebes could not be enacted except the narration either by the chorus or the other characters. So even the king Oedipus is seething with anger after the blind Theseus has leveled up the information that you're the one, you're the culprit who has killed the previous king, and that is why this plague has come over Thebes as a punishment, and that's the wrath of God. So what? In return, Oedipus does, he thinks that his brother-in-law Creon and this blind prophet is committed treason. They are committing treason, and they need to be locked up or they need to be taken away. This is one action which can be taken into the consideration of the hamartia and hubris, where this character is leading towards the tragic flaw, error in judgment, and hubris is the arrogance that he showcases over here. Not for a second he thinks about his heinous crime that he has committed earlier, where he had killed multiple people. He didn't know that he had killed King Lais, but he had killed people, so he could have thought about it, but he never thinks about it. Although all the stage shows time present and reveals the past events in flashback through the voices of the chorus or the other characters, what happens on the stage exemplifies the unity of time. Yes, there are flashbacks, historical events की बात होती है King Oedipus Rex में, but they are not being enacted or performed on the stage. They are just being told by these other caricatures such as chorus and characters. Right, so this is how this drama exemplifies the unity of time. Then we have unity of action, which is the main unity which Aristotle focused in the book called Poetics. So, in both story and language, a good playwright would definitely make the content very concise and expressions would be precise in nature. So, it's an essential, it's not like a Bollywood drama or movie that we see जहाँ पे कुछ भी हो रहा है, किसी किस्म का भी action हो रहा है. No, that's not what it is. So, the plot of Oedipus Rex moves through the life of Oedipus as king of Thebes with flashbacks of his childhood and the abandonment that he felt when he was taken to Corinth. Now, ये flashback and flash forwards हैं, लेकिन ये enact नहीं किए जा रहे on the stage. So he's destined to be a tragic figure, and that is how gods will it, and that is the will of God, of course. The action of the play centers on Oedipus' life from beginning to the end. There are no subplots that we can see in the narration, and the unity of action needs to be comprehended and complemented by the unity of time and place, because they are embedded within the action. In order for the action to take place, time and location has to be there, because we have already established the fact that the drama would take place only in one location and the time would be 12 hours or 24 hours only. So it is only the decree of the gods that ultimately triumphs, but the efforts of a man confronts his destiny that had been decreed by the gods even before his birth, reveals his indomitable spirit and courage to accept defeat and yet not be beaten down. So man is a puppet in the hands of the gods. What this is what they used to believe, and definitely King Laius at his part tried to get rid of the child who could be a possible threat to his throne in the future. And on the other hand, King Oedipus was informed of his fate as well from a drunken man in a party, that you're not a true son to King of Corinth and you don't deserve the crown of Corinth and this and that. And in order to find and the truth, he goes on to an adventure where he gets to know that he's destined to kill his father and marry his mother in order to defy and escape his fate. वो भी एक adventure पे चला जाता है. तो man in both men, they try their best to defeat their fate, but they are not able to. So this is the magnificent part of it. कि humans they know that they have been given a fate, but they try to defy it in the best possible manner, and that is the reason. That is the course of action that would arise the feelings of fear and pity among the masses, which is the ultimate goal of a tragedy. Okay, and then we have unity of place. Again, it's a minor unity. Now, Aristotle's day, in his days, when stories faced logistical challenges because locations were meant to be using set pieces or marking, because the chorus would tell the audience about the shift. If you remember, chorus was also responsible about telling the audiences about any violent scene that had taken place on the stage, or something that was not appropriate to be shown on the stage. तो वो सब कुछ chorus बताया करता था. So technological advancements नहीं थे, therefore the drama had to be linear in fashion, and it had to be enacted in a chronological order in order for the audiences to understand it clearly. Now it is important to understand that many writers, they might write very good dramas, and they would go for unity of place, but if they are unable to incorporate in an appropriate manner, the result, which is the drama itself, will not be effective at all. Now, it is very different when we are watching a drama and when we are reading a drama. There is a clear difference. Watching is different, and therefore, in today's world, in modern take, जो stories होती हैं उन्हें script writing करके change किया जाता है for the screenplay, because परफॉर्मेंस करते हुए देखना और उसे पढ़ने में फर्क होता है. What we see on the stage is the continuation of the story, and it is not possible for the audiences to understand the complexities that could be there in changing, because अगर हमने scene change करना है, setting change करनी है, actor change करना है, कपड़े change करने हैं, बहुत कुछ चेंजिंग करनी है, तो हमें उसमें ब्रेक्स लेनी पड़ेंगी और कर्टन दिखाना होगा, और ग्रीक ट्रेजेडी में कर्टन्स तो होते ही नहीं थे. सो इन ऑर्डर टू सेव the audiences from this confusion that could arise, they used to use these three unities, such as the unity of place, कि जगह को चेंज नहीं किया जाता है. Now, in Oedipus, if you remember, all action happens in the Thebes, and the crowd of people led by a clerical addressed King Oedipus about the need to save the country from the rapid plague. Now, Oedipus assures them that he will look into this matter, and he asks his brother-in-law Creon to go to the oracle and get the reason or possible instructions what can be done. Once the Creon comes back, and then this blind prophet is also been called for to prophesy that what this oracle has told, because oracle tells Creon that Oedipus is the culprit, he is the murderer. So in return, Oedipus gets offended, and he thinks that Creon and Theseus, both of them are committing treason, and they are trying to get power out of his hand. So he's not accepting the truth. However, this information, ये सारी information कौन देता है? A messenger from Corinth comes little later, and he clarifies that yes, he took a child from the same place, Thebes, to the king of Corinth who had no children. So then he King Oedipus is forced to rethink about his choices, and then he looks for the shepherd boy who actually gave away the child. Queen Jocasta जो बच्चा पैदा होती है एक shepherd boy को देती है, तो वो boy उसको भी बुलाया जाता है, and he clarifies that yes, I gave the child away. So unity of place is not disturbed. Everything is enacted on the stage only, and that extra information that is from the past is given by either the chorus or the messengers from the stage settings. So the chorus enters and predicts the fall of Oedipus from his regal splendor of becoming an outcast eventually. So this is how protagonist and the audience is not taken to the Corinth actually, but then what happens in Corinth is told to the entire audience and the characters by a passenger itself. So this is how we can say that these three unities of Aristotle are used in drama in order to make the understanding among the audiences clarified. Now, if you have any questions, please go ahead and ask. I'm giving you 5 minutes, and after that, I'll be taking questions. If there are no questions, you can write in the chat box that everything is clear. Just write the word clear. If everything is clear, please write clear in the chat box so that I know that you know. If you have any questions, please go ahead and ask. Only Fahad is clear. What about the rest of you? Okay, so most of you are claiming that you have understood. That's great. I hope okay, somebody just wrote clear mama. Okay, that's all right. Anyway, so going back to a quick recap of what we have discussed so far, that is the origin of drama, evolvement of drama as a genre, different types of drama, Greek theater and its stage conventions. We also talked about how it is important to be able to relate with the social, political, and religious background of Athens where it took place, the drama itself, because Sophocles was living up there and he understood the atrocities or injustices which were being done to the common people in the hands of religion, society, and economical pressure as well. Apart from that, we also talked about Oedipus Rex as we took a document in which 5 sections were there. We also looked at the text itself. Twice, 2 classes were spent on it. जहाँ हमने text को देखा, I told you how reference to the context could be attempted. Then today we talked about 3 unities of time. Now there are different. These are not different topics. All these topics, they only prove that Oedipus Rex is a Greek tragedy. The stage conventions or the tragic hero Hamartia, all the Greek जो हमने Greek tragedy का structure भी पढ़ा, that there is a prologue, parados, exodos, scenes and episodes are there, chorus is there. ठीक है, स्टेज सेटिंग में लेफ्ट टू राइट को क्या कहते हैं, राइट टू लेफ्ट को क्या कहते हैं, ये सब कुछ इस ड्रामा को ग्रीक tragedy बनाते हैं. All of these points, they correspond to the same question, that this is a Greek tragedy which has the Aristotelian concept of Greek ड्रामा itself. हमने अरिस्टोटल की डेफिनेशन भी पढ़ी, ट्रैजिक हीरो क्या होता है, एंड देन आर्किटाइपल ट्रैजिक हीरो की जो थ्योरी है अरिस्टोटल की, उसकी बात भी की, जिसमें हमारे पास वी हैड द ट्रेजेडी, ट्रैजिक हीरो, hubris, hamartia, peripeteia, anagrossis, and then there was one more that I'm not able to recall right now. So these pointers are important. Whenever there is a question where you're supposed to confront or justify this a drama as a Greek tragedy, then you're supposed to incorporate all these points into the discussion. I highly recommend that you try to attempt as a homework or as rough work and show it to me so that I can tell you whether you are successful in your attempt or not. Remember, just because आपको story पता है और आपने सारी summary लिख दी है, that is not what is actually a requirement. That is not what is the requirement of this course. Knowing the story and writing the summary is absolutely out of the question. कभी भी बेटे आपको ऐसा सवाल नहीं आएगा कि summary लिखें. कभी भी आपसे ये नहीं कहा जाएगा कि एडिपस रेक्स की समरी लिखें. आप में से मेजॉरिटी ने करना यही है, आई नो दैट, बट इफ यू डू दैट यू विल बी लूजिंग स्कोर्स. यू शुड बी एबल टू एड्रेस द क्वेश्चन, specific address phrases in the question that you should be able to address. So that is everything that I wanted to share about this particular drama. I hope you're done. Now we will not be talking about this drama anymore. We have spent, I think, more than sufficient amount of time of this on this drama. Now we move forward to the next one. That is Dr. Faustus. And in order to understand Dr. Faustus, we need to know about Christopher Marlowe, who's the writer. Please understand, time and again, I've told you that if you don't understand the historical evolvement of drama, that how drama from Greek theater went to the miracle and mystery plays, to the Elizabethan drama, to the Renaissance drama, then Restoration drama, and etc., then it is very difficult for you to understand what is happening. थोड़ी सी सेल्फ स्टडी बेटे आपको खुद भी करनी पड़ेगी. I tried my best to make a background or a foundation for you. The rest is up to you. You have to read at your own as well. So now we are moving forward from the Greek theater to the Elizabethan drama, which comes under the Renaissance drama as well. दोनों को आप क्लासिकल ड्रामा में कैटेगराइज कर सकते हैं. अब क्रिस्टोफर मार्लोव की हम बायोग्राफी देखेंगे थोड़ी सी. विल गेट टू नो हिम अ लिटिल बिट सो दैट वी कैन understand the drama. After that, I would like to tell you about the Elizabethan drama or Elizabethan theatre. ग्रीक थिएटर हमने डिस्कस कर लिया. अब हम करेंगे एलिजाबेथन थिएटर. व्हाई आर वी कॉलिंग इट एन एलिजाबेथन थिएटर? बिकॉज दिस थिएटर वाज प्रैक्टिस्ड इन द एज ऑफ क्वीन एलिजाबेथ, वेयर क्वीन एलिजाबेथ वाज रेनिंग, यानी उनकी दौरे हुकूमत चल रही थी. ठीक है. नाउ लेट्स टेक अ quick break of 2 minutes so that you can absorb all this information, and then we go discuss Christopher Marlowe, who is the writer of Dr. Faustus, the next play. Okay, that was enough of a break, I believe. Now let's talk about. We are going to quickly look at the biography of Christopher Marlowe. These are two professors, जाने माने professors हैं. They are talking about Christopher Marlowe and how, what kind of dramatist he was. Very short biography, but it is helpful, and they are going to correlate it with the people, with the Elizabethan age and what was happening in that age. And the pictures that you might see in the background and otherwise, they are definitely helpful for you to remember that how it Elizabethan people were and how they used to behave. So this is the biography that I'm referring to. Let's watch it together.
Christopher Marlowe was the bad boy of Elizabethan literature. He pushed the limits of literary form. He challenged the religious status quo. He challenged social norms, legal norms of behavior. In a word, Marlowe pushed limits.
There is no record of Christopher Marlowe's birth date, but there are records of his baptism on February 26, 1564, in Canterbury, England. Marlowe was the son of a shoemaker. He attended the King's School and then won a scholarship to Cambridge University.
Cambridge University hesitated to grant Christopher Marlowe his master's degree in 1587 because they suspected that he may have converted to Catholicism. But the Crown, or namely the Privy Council, intervened on Marlowe's behalf to give him the degree. So this has led scholars to speculate that Marlowe must have been an agent for the Crown.
After his education at Cambridge, Marlowe went to London to produce literature for the public stage. This is the beginning of the professionalization of writing and the concept of a person living as a writer. Marlowe managed to figure out what his audiences wanted: violent, sensationalistic fiction, and he provided that.
Marlowe's first play, Dido, Queen of Carthage, was performed in London in the late 1580s.
Marlowe was just before Shakespeare in terms of achieving popularity and fame in the Elizabethan theater.
Marlowe's second play, Tamburlaine, was performed in the London stage around 1587, and it's one of the first plays to use blank verse in an effective theatrical way. Blank verse is unrhymed iambic pentameter, and so it's a big deal to try to develop that.
After Tamburlaine, Marlowe wrote only 4 additional plays: Dr. Faustus, Jew of Malta, Edward II, and Massacre at Paris.
Christopher Marlowe had a wonderful influence on Shakespeare. Marlowe's plays often resulted in a similar play by Shakespeare, which dealt with very similar themes, as if Shakespeare were one-upping Marlowe, which is the way Elizabethan theater often worked.
Marlowe wrote 4 plays that are famous today. Shakespeare wrote 38. But those 4 plays that Marlowe wrote provided Shakespeare with the plot material for 4 of his most popular plays, so that Jew of Malta becomes Merchant of Venice, Dr. Faustus becomes Macbeth, Edward II becomes Richard II, and Tamburlaine becomes the Henriette.
Marlowe's most famous play was the tragical history of Dr. Faustus.
Dr. Faustus was incendiary. During a period of time when you had Puritans outside of the theater rallying against it as the Devil's Cauldron, Marlowe puts on a play where the title character summons the devil on stage. This is a period of time when people are new to the theater, and if you can imagine having a title character draw a whole bunch of circles and pentagrams on stage and mumble in Latin, and poof, a devil appears, you have a sense of just how frightening that play might have been.
Christopher Marlowe never married and died when he was only 29 years old on May 30th, 1593.
Marlowe died in typically sensationalistic circumstances. He was stabbed in the eye, he was at a boarding house, and presumably there was a dispute over the bill or the reckoning. This is thought by many people to be simply a cover. A few days prior, he had been accused of treason and of heresy. The timing of this death is extremely suspect. Despite the fact that Marlowe was only writing plays in London for 6 years, he is one of the top 10
Okay, so did you watch the video? Was you able to watch it, or there was a problem? I can see a problem at my end. Did you watch the video, guys? Yes or no? Please clarify.
Yep. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so can somebody quickly wrap it up for the rest of the class? जो भी आपको समझ आए, जो भी सबसे important points आपको समझ आए. A quick recap of this video that we just watched.
इंटरनेट इशू हो रहा है हम लोगों को बहुत.
Anybody who doesn't have a excuse or who could actually share? No? No interest? All right, so in the video, the lady and the professor only tells us about that Christopher Marlowe was a mystery himself because his date birth is not known, but he was baptized and he did had a connection with the Elizabethan reign. Therefore, once he was in deep waters where he could not get his degree, but because he was true to the state and Elizabethan reign, therefore it was also thought that he was one of the spies that Elizabeth had because he was writing plays and he was performing plays for her and in her theater. Then there were mystery and miracle plays as well. The movable plays were also discussed. So Christopher Marlowe wrote only four dramas, and those four dramas were magnificent, which means they are legendary, they are masterpieces, and it is believed that Shakespeare, who came after him, is the author who was very much influenced by Christopher Marlowe. There are other controversies as well in which they simply say that Christopher Marlowe is his work has been stolen by Shakespeare and much more. Shakespeare wrote 38 plays and Christopher Marlowe only four. But the impact these two had was of a similar nature, although you probably know Shakespeare more because he has written more. Otherwise, in the history, they have or they hold the same level of respect and prestige. And even there are sayings and documents and surveys they claim that Christopher Marlowe was far superior than Shakespeare. But if we compare and contrast both of them in terms of writing and plays, you will see that there are too many similarities between the two in terms of thematic landscape and how they approached. And in the beginning, the professor says that Christopher Marlowe was a bad boy, which simply indicates that he was somebody who would like to experiment with the genre of drama. He was not following the followed. Remember that Sophocles or the Greek theater is different, and the theater that we are studying or talking about today, that is a little different. Now, I would like to, show you a little video that talks about the Elizabethan theater itself. That will give you a sense of history that you need to know regarding this type of drama. I'll only show you first few minutes and the rest is to be watched by your own self. ताकि आपको पता चल जाए बल्कि हम थिएटर ये 13 मिनट्स एंड 10 मिनट्स पे चले जाते हैं
Did
छोटी
you know
वीडियो
that
पे।
William Shakespeare wasn't the only successful playwright from the Elizabethan era? Stick around to learn all about Queen Elizabeth I of England and Elizabethan theatre. Hello and welcome to World History Encyclopedia. My name is Kelly and today's video is all about Elizabethan theatre. Don't forget the easiest way to
Now, in this video, you'll be able to look at the stage conventions of Elizabethan theatre, Greek theatre के conventions. Conventions का मतलब simply put ये होता है कि किस तरह से stage setting, time, place को use करना है, वो different थे. और जिस तरह से Elizabethan theatre में इसको use किया जाता था, that's going to be different. So focus. You have to make these points at your own.
support us is by giving this video a thumbs up subscribing to our channel and hitting that bell icon for notifications so you don't miss out on any new uploads. World History Encyclopedia is a non-profit organisation to those who subscribe via the pop-up. We can't talk about Elizabethan theatre without first talking about the lady it was named after. Elizabeth reigned as Queen Elizabeth I of England for 44 years between 1558 until her death in 1603, succeeding her half-sister Mary I of England. Elizabeth was known as the Virgin Queen since she refused to marry and was both a capable and shrewd leader. The second half of the 16th century under Elizabeth's rule is known as the Elizabethan era and is considered a golden age for England. When Elizabeth assumed the throne at just 25 years old, she inherited a fragile kingdom that had lost its territory in France. The state was close to bankruptcy, and since the political arena of the time was very male-oriented, pressure was put on queens to marry as soon as possible. Elizabeth, however, had no intention of marrying, and simply stated that she was married to her country. She shook things up in the English government with her caution when spending money and her disinterest in gaining territory in France and Scotland. Under Elizabeth I, arts and culture flourished in England, and she enjoyed watching plays and outdoor spectacles, as well as being an active patron to artists and playwrights. The term Elizabethan theatre naturally refers to the style of theatre being composed and performed in England during the reign of Queen Elizabeth I, which continued under her Stuart successors. The Elizabethans didn't invent theatre, they have ancient Greece to thank for that, and during the medieval period in England, morality plays, mystery plays, and other performances during religious holidays and ceremonies were staged. What we see in Elizabethan theatre is the first professional troupes of actors, sponsored by the Queen, nobles, and anyone else who had enough money to fund performances. Plays were now entirely free from religious themes, which is perhaps due to the Protestant Reformation, which in England resulted in a split from the Catholic Church thanks to Henry VIII in 1533. The Reformation allowed for greater freedom of expression on many levels, including public entertainment. This was not always considered a good thing, however. Elizabeth banned the performance of unlicensed plays in 1559, since she recognised how public art could influence both politics and the public mind. In 1572, only nobles were allowed to sponsor professional acting troupes, and from 1574, all of those acting troupes had to be licensed. Since the playwrights could move away from religious topics, they truly let their imagination run wild. With English nationalism rising like never before, historical plays were especially popular, as well as plays based on Greek and Roman history and mythology. Acting troupes or acting companies were groups of men who were professional actors and would move around performing in stately and royal homes until permanent theatres were constructed. The first professional and licensed troupe were Leicester's Men, and they belonged to Robert Dudley, the first Earl of Leicester, and a court favourite of
It goes on. Now she'll be explaining about the theater, the Swan Theater, and then what kind of clothing could be there, the procession of Shakespearean character. So it goes on. It's a very now this is the model of Globe Theater, which was very much used in Elizabethan age for Christopher Marlowe's and Shakespeare's dramas, and many plays were enacted on this, on these. Then she talks about that Christopher Marlowe was a 21-year-old man, and he was considered to be the spy for Queen Elizabeth's reign. And then he started writing about the Spanish tragedies and other plays. So you can look at this video at your own. I'm going to paste it in your class group. So that is a little introduction about your next author and Elizabethan age that you should know, that is Christopher Marlowe. I hope it's clear. और इसके बारे में भी बेटे I will post material, आप वहाँ से पढ़ सकेंगे जब आपके पास time होगा. And it is important that you read. The more you read, अगर पढ़ना नहीं है तो at least इन videos को ज़रूर सुने ताकि थोड़ा बहुत आपको clear हो जाए mind में that how the things are progressing further. Apart from this, in the next class we'll talk about Christopher Marlowe and Elizabeth drama a little bit more, and then we'll start the drama itself, which is the tragic fall of Dr. Faustus. तो डॉक्टर फाउस्टस की बात होगी और उसके टेक्स्ट को हम देखने की कोशिश करेंगे. Now, because time is approaching and the most important part has to be performed by me, that is your attendance. So I'm going to take your attendance, and when I take your name, please unmute yourself and say present, and then again go mute yourself. Because अगर आप अपने आप को इस तरह से अनम्यूट रखेंगे तो फिर बाकियों को भी आवाज इसी तरह से सुनाई देगी. एक सेकेंड, गिव मी अ मिनट. Okay, be attentive for your roll call. Today is 21st. Okay, Amir Khan,
Yes, ma'am.
Mushaba, Munaza Javed,
Present, ma'am.
Husna Kaisar,
Present, ma'am.
Sayyida Aisha Siddiqa,
Present, ma'am.
Ehsanullah,
Yes, ma'am.
Aisha Tariq,
Present, ma'am.
Amir Hamza,
Yes, ma'am.
Zainul Abidin,
Yes, ma'am.
Memuna Taj,
Yes, ma'am.
Ismail Khan,
मैम उसका इंटरनेट इशू है, वो जो क्लास ज्वाइन कर लेकिन फिर लेफ्ट हो जाता है वो गांव में.
Aisha Siddiqa, Akhtar Zeb, Dania Khizr,
Present.
Muhammad Suhail,
Yes, ma'am.
Hasnain Shah,
यस मैम.
Noor Fatima,
Present, ma'am.
Mashook Ali,
Yes, ma'am.
Sawan, Adil Hussain, Fahad Hussain, Sayyida Lareb Fatima, Muhammad Atta, Dua Zafar,
Present, ma'am.
Fahad Khan,
Yes, ma'am.
Afsa, Waqas Safi, Miraj Siraj,
Yes, ma'am.
Nadia Javed,
Present, ma'am.
Muhammad Shahbaz Ali,
Yes, ma'am.
Muhammad Zuneek, Noor Fatima.
Present, ma'am.
मैम अख्तर से प्रेजेंट है मैम.
Okay, please mute yourself. अख्तर ज़ेब, मैं आपको आपकी लगा देती हूँ, 1 मिनट. अख्तर,
ओके मैम.
इतने शोर में क्या ही सुन रहे होंगे आप? कुछ तो आपको देखना चाहिए ना, कहाँ सुन रहे हैं, क्या कर रहे हैं. थोड़ा सा प्रेपरेशन करके बैठे क्लास के लिए. टेक इट सीरियसली, नॉट द चॉइस है बेटा. ठीक है बेटा, आप लोग ये मैंने अटेंडेंस लगा दी है. Any questions? If there are any questions, please go ahead and ask.
मैम
जी जी.
मैम मेरा नेट नहीं चल रहा है तो बार बार मैं लीव कर रहा हूँ, तो मेरी अटेंडेंस अगर हो सकता है.
देखिए, मुझे पता है कि ये सब, you know, बहाने होते हैं, लेकिन नोट कर लिया है
नहीं
मैंने।
मैम,
लेट्स सी
नहीं
कितने
अटेंडेंस
बन
आपका।
सकते हैं फिर फ्यूचर में, देख लेते हैं। कोई बात नहीं बेटे, लगा दिया मैंने, देख लो स्क्रीन पे शो हो रहा होगा। एनीबडी एल्स? Okay, so please do read the
मैम
material that
मैम
are.
अता
Hmm.
अता दस्तगीर मैम,
He's
उसका
not
भी
here.
नेट इशू।
No, no, he's not here. Okay, 5 minutes रह गए बेटे. If you have any questions regarding the discussion that we just had, because we did talk about a lot of stuff that is important, and I hope that you remember that you have a quiz which I might have posted. Let me see. Okay, the date that I announced for the quiz, can somebody remind me? आपको याद है क्या डेट दी थी? डेट थी आई थिंक 24 या 25th?
मैम क्विज नहीं लिया आपने?
नहीं लिया, नहीं मैंने अनाउंस किया था।
मैम
नहीं किया
अनाउंस भी
आपने।
नहीं किया।
Okay, okay, now I can announce. Whatever we have discussed regarding um, the drama Oedipus Rex and the discussion revolving around it will be part of the quiz, which will be taken on 20, जो आपकी सेकेंड क्लास है ना, मतलब एक फ्राइडे को होती है और एक होती है, यस, 25th of February को। मैं आपके गूगल क्लासरूम में भी पेस्ट करने लगी हूँ, तो यू कैन हैव अ लुक देयर एज वेल। ठीक है, अब तो अनाउंस हो गया, अब तो कोई इशू नहीं होना चाहिए, राइट? अब कोई बेटे कोई क्वेश्चंस हो तो प्लीज पूछे। ओके जी, थैंक यू सो मच। सी यू ऑन ट्यूसडे। अल्लाह हाफिज, टेक केयर।
अल्लाह हाफिज।
थैंक यू।